Orks. I love orks. I love orks. I love orks. I love orks. They're my favorite faction. I get to talk about my favorite faction, which is orks. So if by the title and the, intro to this video and the graphics you see on screen don't, inform you enough of what we're talking about today, I wanted to talk about orks. And really, what I want to talk about today is just a basic background of basic orc history, what an orc is, and then I want to go down the list of some theories I've made, because I think about orcs a lot. I love orcs, they're my favorite faction. Of course I'm going to theory craft with my faction. There's a million faction theories about the Imperium, the Dark Eldar, the Necrons. What if the Necrons get their skin back? What if the Imperium doesn't become a shithole? What if the Eldar stop, being annoying? What happens? But I don't see a lot about the orcs, my favorite faction in all of Warhammer. I think a lot of the time orcs are ignored because they're the comic relief faction, and, in universe too, they're, ignored most of the time by major factions or used as pawns, and really only in the orcs books about orcs do they really show what for. Usually it's a story about a war boss coming down to a planet, beating everyone up, and then a guardsman commander beheads him with a power sword because the orc was too aggressive and got parried. But I want to cover some theories about the Great Green myself, and, give you a good outlook on why I like them so much, and some theories on their origin and why they are the way that they are. So first, let's start with a definition of what is an orc. And what an orc is basically a member of the orcoid race created by the old ones back in long time ago's. So, and I'm just adding this in now. If you already know all the basic stuff about orcs, you can just skip ahead in the video to when I start theory crafting. But basically, the orcoid race is made up of grots, snotlings, orcs, and squigs. And it's going to have also a lot of foodstuff fungus which grows alongside the orcoid race to proliferate their survival and active, expansion. Its ultimate goal of waging a war. To break it down really quickly, we're going to start at the bottom. Squigs, sorry. Don't mean to offend anyone out there. Squigs are going to be your beasts of burden and usual biomechanical tools. We need an oil that produce, get an oil squig. We need some hairstylists, we're going to get a hair squig. We need a beast of burden to plow some fields or, just use as shock infantry. We're going to get some squigs. Then you have your snotlings, that's going to be used as basic dumb labor for farmers and for mostly unskilled sort of, let's go and cultivate the orc fungus. They're really more of the orc spawning pool's caretakers, though orcs will grab them and eat them, but squigs and snotlings usually get along quite well, better than, orcs and grots, which we're going to talk about next. So the grot basically is a orcoid slave race, and as I say that, don't feel bad for the grots. They will skin children alive if given the opportunity. They are cruel, mean, but what's important to this, they are just intelligent enough to help orcs out in their day-to-day routines of weapon manufacturing, getting food ready, repairing tanks, that they can affect the war effort in a positive way. But they're also just not intelligent or not strong enough to make the war effort a hassle. So a grot will be strong enough to repair a gun, but won't be strong enough to really take out a pain boy. Now, there are multiple stories of grot rebellions. One of the big ones is the Big Red Gobbo, and it's really seen as a joke throughout most orc society, and it is kind of a joke throughout most orc society, because it really doesn't lead anywhere. Basically, how grot rebellions go is the grots rebel, and then they start infighting, and then they usually die when another orc Waaagh comes along, or orc spawns just comes in and wipes them all out, and then you restart the process. And talking about orc spawning, let's talk about the big ones, the main leaders of orc society, the orcs. Now, every orc boy is kind of just gonna be drawn out of pit, dumb as bricks, and just real basic thing, just made for punching and kicking and biting. That's all they know, and they'll be born with that. After that, they're gonna go punch deer in the face for about Probably a couple months till they get big and strong enough to go challenge some orc boys to try to join a mob. After that, well, roof's the limit. Orc society is very merit-based. If you're a boy that can find a fight like that, you're probably gonna, other orcs are gonna look to you for guidance. If you're an orc boy that knows how to fix stuff, well, you start a mech shop, you're gonna be, fixing trucks and getting a lot of business. If you know how to put boys back together, well, boom. You got a business there. If you can shoot lightning out of your hands, well, everyone's going to stay away from you, but they're going to come get you when it's time to get wawing. But I hear you saying, what if you're not an odd boy that knows how to do anything? Well, that's going to fall into the 99% other boys, which are, unemployed, and their one job is to fight and, make ruckus, who walk around all day just punching each other in the face, breaking stuff and giving the war boss a headache. And usually those boys are just loaded up on ships and sent to the front. Oh, and if you don't know this already, orcs love to fight. I mean, it is not just a want, like, it would be pretty cool to go punch someone in the face. It is a physical need. If they do not, they start to degenerate and devolve, and they get weak as no one's business. There's actually a small bit in, I think, xenology, or xenobiology, which talks about how they captured an orc, and when they opened up his cell, the orc was fat, lazy, and weak, and it was actually really, really hard for the Inquisitor to do a biopsy, because just how different this orc became over a few days of capture. Anyway, let's say you make it a long time without dying at war, which is what's going to happen to most orcs. Most orcs are going to, get off the warship, land on a planet, and then an Imperial Guardsman's going to dome them from 40 meters away with a lasgun. And that's how most orc stories will end. But let's say, hey, you make it way further. You do well, you get a mob, you become a knob, which is nobility. Then you'll start going up the hierarchy of orc society, which is basically, the other knobs, the other war bosses, big mechs, all the things. All the senior rank is the people that, guide orc society, that 99% of boys, to the fight. Because if you're not doing that, well, those boys are going to look at you and about... you may be a big boy, but you've also got about 5,000 of your followers looking at you, and if they don't like what's going on, they're not above just going in there and clubbing you over the head until they get someone that will find them a fight. And, by the way, your rise to ascension to orc nobility is not dictated by time or experience. You can be a fresh-spawned youth, go up to the biggest orc, and become a war boss within 5 minutes of spawning. The problem with that is you're probably not bigger than the war boss. Usually it takes a couple years to become the big orc. I know Gazgul actually was just a regular boy. He got shot in the head, got literal brain damage, and with 5 minutes he was the war boss of his tribe, and within a year he was the war boss of a planet. The orcs have a very fast-moving social system, which actually comes to bite them in the ass when the main tactic against orcs was used, which is kill the war boss, because then all of orc society has to shift to then fit that. From every lowly boy to every knob, everyone will be infighting. And in one of Caiaphas Cain's books, it actually talked about how Cain killed a war boss, and then every single war boss working under the warlord boss, or big war boss, started infighting, and it was marked on how strange it was to be at the same time fighting the orcs while the orcs are fighting themselves. Anyway, let's move on to orc history. And basically there's only like 3 to 5 things that really matter in orc history, because the orcs really don't care about history. Why do I care about what happened yesterday when I can care about the fight in the future? Orcs are a very forward-thinking race, and basically the 5 things is the War in Heaven, the Big Party, the Great Crusade, and then, Great Crusade, the Beast, and then the Rise of Gazgul. And really, I'll just go through those really quick. Let's, of course, start with the biggest thing to happen in the Warhammer setting, what started everything moving, and which actually made, I think, 1/3 of the races, if you believe some of the theories going on, but the War in Heaven, the birth of the orcs. They were basically created by the old ones as a biological war machine against the Necrons, because the Necrons were eating souls, they were not doing well, so they just needed something to go toe-to-toe with their armies on land and in orbit. 2 things of note there is it just gives you a baseline of what the orc was, and right then it's also called the Krorks, but for everyone else it's the orcs. It's big orcs. And actually this is the time period that has a lot of my theories going on in, and that I will be talking about later in the video. The next historical event, I don't think a lot of people know about it, and I don't have a definitive source, so Luton would be quite disappointed in me. But I don't know if this is headcanon, if this is made up. But basically, after the War in Heaven concluded, Necrons went to sleep, and the enslavers came out, and then they were beaten back, and they eventually went back to the warp. Everyone was kind of standing around, and then you still had a massive amount of Krorks. So the two main races around were the Krork and the Eldar, and the Krork, without any, leash anymore, with all the old ones dead, looked around, said, "Oh, hey, Eldar, we're gonna kick your ass." And then the Eldar said, no, and then did a peace sign, and then vanished into the webwave, probably for a couple hundred years, which the orcs looked around and said, "Where's the fight?" So they had something called the Big Party, where basically the Krorks ended because they beat themselves into the dirt. This is where you get the thing of orcs beat themselves stupid. So it divided them from what was originally, I believe, the Blood Axes were the main orc faction of the Krorks, or a Blood Axe equivalent of what it was called. Anyway, orc unity ended and became a tribal period for the orc race. After that, we can infer that the Eldar came out of the webway, saw that the orcs had basically killed themselves, and, mopped up the remains, and gone about their 50 million year reign over the galaxy. And I'll talk about the Eldar and their 50 million year reign later on, trust me, I just need to hype myself up for that. Anyway, they didn't deal with the orc problem that much, because if the orcs ever tried to invade, they could just go wham, vanish, or they had weapons of such high quality that the orcs couldn't compete. So, after that, we get to the Great Crusade. Eldar fell, humanity is rising, and really what we find is the orcs were gone from really absolutely 12-meter tall, knight-based armies of orcs into more Primarch-sized orcs, where each orc was basically the size of, like, a Primarch. It is massive. It is big. By the way, of course, there's smaller orcs than Primarchs, but through reading through the Horus Heresy and the way orcs were described, they were very big. And I do say Primarch-sized, not Primarch-skilled. So orcs were put down quite easily by the legions. Actually, I have a theory that the bolt gun was designed to counter the orc, because it was needed to just destroy all the organs of a lightly armored big infantry troop like the orc, so the bolter would be perfect for that. But basically in this time period, orcs were basically wiped from existence. All their major strongholds were destroyed, and they were actually probably a dying race. I know, orcs being a dying race, but this is the closest thing they became to dying out completely, because for the next couple hundred, or I think it's 2,000 years, orcs were not a problem in the Imperium. That is until our next historical point, the War of the Beast, where orcs very quickly became a problem for the Imperium. They showed up over Terra with a giant moon, shenanigans happened, there were orc primarchs, Vulcan came back, and there was a lot of fighting. And one of the biggest criticisms I've seen of the War of the Beast is the orc diplomat, and I'll fold into that later on with my theories about the orcs and why they are the way that they are later in the video. I know I keep saying later, but, if you want to go here, just skip ahead. Anyway, after that, orcs were basically pushed back, and we get our modern incarnation with the Rise of Ghazghkull, where an orc was running around on a planet, got shot in the head, and became Orc Jesus Christ. His brain was shoved to such an amount of mush that he became a very big orc and started seeing visions of Gork and Mork, which told him to do one thing, and that's fight. Which I don't understand, because that's already what is built into his code, but I guess it made him fight harder. Anyway, from that point on, we just have our modern stories of Ghazghkull burning down Armageddon, failing to burn it down completely, coming back a few years later, burning it down again, failing to do it completely, and then deciding, it's burning a lot, but, there's other planets out in the galaxy I could be burning right now as well. So he's been off doing that, while the Space Wolves, the Black Templars, and basically anyone with a gun and a, loyalty to the Emperor, and even those things that don't have loyalty to the Emperor, such as Angron and other things, have been deciding to go fight orcs. Also, there's a thing that Ghazghkull may be looking for revenge against Angron because he may have killed Commissar Yarrick. And, you know, if anyone was going to kill Yarrick, that was going to be Gaz. So Gaz may be hunting down Angron while the Imperium hunts down Gaz. It's a circle. Imperium hunts Gaz, Gaz hunts Angron, Angron hunts Imperium. So it's a sort of a rock, paper, scissors thing going on. And of course, that will catch you up to basically what's going on with the orcs in modern day 40k. Though there are smaller stories like Uftak Blackhawk taking over the, the Tekwa, a couple other orcs doing stuff. The war boss, I think, left on Armageddon was Snickrot, so he's just going around the jungles killing guardsmen and demons now. And I think, really, it's just a lot of smaller stories which really don't impact the greater setting. Even though they're very cool, they don't have, what I can say, historical relevance to the creating of tides of history of history. That was a jarbled sentence, but this is a video about orcs. Where you came here for proper grammar, get out of here. Anyway, now we approach the thing which I made this video to talk about, and wow, just the preamble of this video is longer than all my other lore videos, so, you know, they better be good theories. So, let's start with number 1. Theory 1, not really a big impact on the universe itself, but just kind of a question I posed is, why are the orcs so happy all the time? Why would you need to make them happy? Why'd the old ones design them to be happy? They're always laughing, they're having a fun time, even with, you know, the Imperium, when they're bantering, it's more sort of play for them, like, dearest orc, we will destroy you from orbit if you do not take your wretched self from this system. And the orcs will respond, it's gonna be awesome. You ready to fight? You ready to fight? It's time to go. It's time to go. And my theory for this is a very basic one, but something a lot of people don't talk about because the only thing we know of the War in Heaven, I said it was going to come up later, is basically orcs, Necrons, and Eldar, and the old ones and the Catan. Those are the only races that we hear about. But what we do also hear about is that there were a lot of other races in the galaxy during the War in Heaven. So my idea is the orcs were designed to be happy all the time, to discuss plans with the other species, because they had to work with Eldar, they had to work with the other species in coalition to fight off the Necron. And there's actually a theory that the Tyranids were made by the old ones because the Necrons were wiping out so many species that it was just better to deploy the Tyranids and, I don't know, safeguard the genetic code so it's not lost forever. Anyway, the orcs are happy to get along with the other races during the War in Heaven, which is their primary design. If the old ones officially won the War in Heaven without, you know, them all dying, I'm pretty sure they would have had a orc off button, or at least modify their race to be more civil. But that's not the ending we got. The old ones got wiped out, so we don't know that. And yes, I do know that there are quite downer orcs. I do know that orcs most of the time will just be screaming in rage. But we have to remember that the orcs and the Krorks are two very different mindsets. We can see this actually in Talker's perspective. Talker is from a short story that basically has an orc that opens up his mind and is flooded with information from the Krork. And basically it is a very intelligent, it's very mechanical knowledge of, this happens because this happens. It's like he's reading from a dictionary of, oh, this happens because... He runs to Mechanicus and he's like, oh, they're doing this because they had a cultural collapse and they had to reorientate themselves to their new reality. It causes magical thinking within them, within that society. And an orc looks at him and goes, what are you talking about? And he goes, oh, I don't know. It's a great little bit from, I think, End of Days. Anyway, I bring up this orc socialization because this actually defends the orc diplomat, which sounds really stupid, but it actually kind of makes sense. Because when an orcs are spawning, if they don't have enough numbers, they're all going to be fighters. So if in a snakebite clan on a jungle world, you're all going to have just boys, and their main goal is going to be, we gotta fight, we gotta survive. But as the orc thing grows, we get more room for specialization. And that specialization is mech boys, weird boys, docs, all of it, pain boys, all of it. And basically what the War on the Beast showed is if an orc gets to such an immense degree, orc society will unlock further rule roles in an orc war that orcs are good at. So diplomacy. And I would actually argue that there are quite a few roles that we don't even know about that orcs have because they've just not hit the same Quark level WA as they have in the past. So there's a lot of lost knowledge of the orcs just waiting to be unveiled by the passage of time and the growing of numbers. It's kind of like orc STCs, where to unlock that knowledge, we have to fight even harder. And that's why Gazgul is probably such a big threat, because the Beast got to diplomacy. What roles and jobs could we unlock for Gazgul's WAs? My second theory is, what is the orc sort of psychic gestalt consciousness? This sort of WA energy which forms around them. And why is it built the way that it is? Because looking at it... Okay, let me put it like this. Orcs have this semi-psychic ability to believe something causes something to happen. The main example is they paint something red, it goes faster because they believe red paint will make it faster. Now, that is a very, very interesting thing, and we do know that there is in-universe plot armor for certain characters because of the warp. And I believe this affects the orcs as well, because, oh, through a bunch of shenanigans, this plan actually works. Oh, through a bunch of shenanigans, this gun actually fires. And then we look at the Primarchs, who also, through the Emperor, have in-universe based plot armor, where part of their soul is literally created to resist the fates of time. This is why a lot of Adeptus Astartes have plot armor. This is why a lot of characters have plot armor. It's because their literal soul is connected to the warp and they get that plot armor. And orcs have this as well, where orcs will literally believe into a victory, where they will fight so hard, they'll believe that they're winning so hard that they will actually start to win. It's a crazy thing. Also, kind of broken when you think about it. Wouldn't that just flood the warp with... Wouldn't Khorne and all the other Chaos Gods be wiped out if the orcs believed? Well, this is the beauty of the design of the old ones. The old ones probably foresaw this and say, hey, this race is probably going to make a lot of psychic backlash. How do we do that? Well, when we're designing their gods, because, you know, we're very psychic species and we can now, you know, basically press gods out of a factory line, let's give the orcs 2 gods and let's have them use all that psychic buildup on itself. So the 2 gods are constantly fighting and constantly keeping that psychic backlog from destroying everything else in the galaxy through a unified singular orc god. So basically, the orcs have a little, basically great game going on with their psychic energy because they have such purity of purpose. So to keep the orc consciousness from taking over the entire warp, it is instead fed into these 2 god-like beings, Gork and Mork, which will then use this energy on itself to keep itself contained. And Gork and Mork don't care. They just like to fight. Now this last one, it's just kind of one I've had in the back of my mind. I don't really think it's that true, but it has a little bit of truth in it. Like, it's kind of like a really good lie theory that you could tell someone. And that is that the Adeptus Astartes design is based off of the orc design. Now I know you're like, what? What are you talking about? That's stupid. But I came across this when I was, I think it was The Big Daka. I was reading that, and it was basically had a scene where it was talking about how orcs really don't like any other race. They don't like Humies, they don't like Tau, they don't like Eldar, they don't like anyone. Even 10 boys aren't that fun. The only thing they like to fight besides other orcs most of the time is Adeptus Astartes, and that is because the Adeptus Astartes fight like orcs. They meet you in a field and they crump. Even the Raven Guard will meet you in the field and have a good crump, even though they're sneaky gits like the other orcs. And that actually would make sense, because a little bit of sense, because when the Emperor is looking around and going, I need a force that will conquer the galaxy. What has effectively conquered a lot? Well, the orcs. I need something strong, I need something but I need something loyal. So I will make orc humans, and that is basically what the Adeptus Astartes are. Orc-based humans. They're immune to most diseases. They are extremely strong, extremely long-lived, and extremely battle-focused. It is actually stated that of kind of all the races, Adeptus Astartes are the most... They get upset if they're out of fight and combat for a long time. There's not really an Adeptus Astartes retirement plan. They have to die in battle. So, that's kind of just like a out-of-my-ass theory. I'm going to pull right there, that the Emperor designed Adeptus Astartes to be a bit like orcs. And that's from the orc perspective only. That's pure heresy. Anyway, as a lot of theories go, I probably could pull a few more out. Let's do a lightning round really quick. I'm just gonna state things, and don't take any of it's true. I'm just, where'd you get that source? I made it the fuck up. 1. After the war in heaven, all the war races created, Tyranids, Orcs, and Eldar, were going to be wiped out by the old ones. Don't know if the old ones were that friendly at that point in time. They've given up so much, and they'd been through so much war that keeping these warlike races around, even a shadow version of itself, would be quite dangerous. Because the Eldar, especially, would not like to be said, oh, you're actually a danger to the galaxy. There's another theory that maybe the Eldar had more effect on the Great Party than we would like to believe. Maybe they started orc infighting massively, because the orcs know, if I fight another orc, I'm wasting time, and while the Necrons did go to sleep, that wouldn't stop the orcs from going out and finding them. Orcs' whole thing is finding a fight. So the Necrons going underground really wouldn't stop the orc search. They'd just start digging them up and going, hey, let's go fight them, let's go find them. It's actually surprising that the Eldar didn't do this to a significant amount. So I think that the Eldar may have played a part in the orcs beating themselves stupid to then claim the galaxy for themselves for 50 million years. There's not a lot of risk and a lot of reward from having the orcs infight after the old ones are gone, because it's really just you and your stupid, big, angry cousin that was made for the war in heaven. And that's the only thing keeping you from complete galactic domination for 50 million years. So if that did happen, well, it worked. And, it's not like the orcs care if it happened. They're too busy beating themselves up. And why would the Eldar keep that historical record around? It's far more easier to just say, oh, the orcs in their brutish ways fell into infighting, instead of, our intelligent fighters and friends, the Krorks, they were, a bit too powerful, so we decided to, put a little Zinchian thought in the back of their head and had them start infighting. So, we could take over. Why would the Eldar say that? Why wouldn't they just go, the Krorks are gonna Krork? And now, we're never gonna get an answer on that, and that is purely BS on my part. But, yeah, it's a fun theory I like. And as we end this video, I just wanted to make a few things clear. First, it's a very upbeat video I've made here. It's very fun, very, the jolly music in the background. But I do want to say, I do know the orcs are absolutely, actually horrifying. They take over worlds, they kill everyone, and then they leave, and then their descendants grow up and keep killing everyone. So orcs are absolutely horrifying. They have slavery practices on other races, and they are monsters of space. They are absolute monsters. And I'd just like to say I love them still. They're still great. Of all the 40k factions, I'd say probably they're the best. They're the best. I love them. But sadly, I do have to admit, because I am not an idiot or I am not blinded by my own biases, that the orcs are never going to truly win 40k. They are a massive helping tool for other races, but they probably will never return to Krorkdom, and they will never return to galactic supremacy. But they sure as hell are going to go on fighting for as long as they can. Anyway, have a good day, y'all. And please let me know what y'all think of the video. I'm happy to answer any comments, and I do stream on Twitch, so yeah, check me out there. I'll post that in the description. Any ideas for future videos, send over. I'm happy to talk about most things, and I like focusing on more niche, more in-depth, nerdy shit. Alright, have a good one. Have a great day.